My name is Jan Thompson, 32 years old, and I never thought buying my dream house would turn into a family nightmare. After years of saving every penny from my marketing career, I finally had a place to call my own. A sanctuary, my private haven. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, I walked in to find my mother Margaret confidently leading my brother's wife, Alicia, and her friend through my home, pointing out all the things they would help me fix. I smiled politely, waited for them to leave, then made one important phone call. Before sharing my story, where are you watching from today? Please like and subscribe so you never miss stories about reclaiming your power. Growing up in the Thompson household meant one thing above all else: privacy was a luxury, not a right. My mother Margaret ran our home like a military operation where personal boundaries existed only in theory. From my earliest memories, I recall her reading my diaries, entering my bedroom without knocking, and sharing my personal information with relatives, neighbors, and occasionally complete strangers at the grocery store. Jan had her first period today, she announced to my father and brother Jason at dinner when I was 12. I still remember sliding down in my chair, wishing the floor would swallow me whole, while Jason made gagging noises, and my father awkwardly cleared his throat. The rules were different for Jason, though. His room was his castle, his privacy sacred. When I once entered without knocking to retrieve a borrowed book, the family meeting that followed made it clear his space was inviolable, mine was communal property. Boys need their privacy, Jan, my mother explained with that condescending smile. You understand, don't you, sweetie? This pattern continued throughout my childhood and adolescence. If I locked my bedroom door, the lock would mysteriously disappear the next day. If I kept a journal, I'd find it slightly misplaced, pages dog-eared on entries about crushes or fights with friends. My mother always had an excuse ready. I was just putting away laundry, or I needed to vacuum, or my personal favorite. I thought you might be hiding something dangerous. College should have been my escape, but Margaret had other plans. During Parents' Weekend freshman year, I returned from class to find my dorm room completely rearranged. My carefully chosen posters were replaced with more appropriate art. My bedspread, picked out with my roommate Kendra, was swapped for one Margaret had brought from home. My roommate stood helplessly in the corner as Margaret proudly showed me how she'd fixed everything. Your room was so disorganized, honey. I just helped tidy up a bit, she explained, ignoring the fact that Kendra and I had spent weeks creating our own space exactly how we wanted it. When I got my first apartment after graduation, history repeated itself. I made the mistake of giving her a key for emergencies only. 2 weeks later, I came home from work to find new curtains, rearranged furniture, and several family photos I'd deliberately left in storage prominently displayed. The key was promptly reclaimed, leading to 3 weeks of tears, guilt trips, and finally, a stony silence that only broke when I agreed to Sunday dinners. Throughout these years, my relationship with Jason and his wife Alicia grew increasingly strained. Jason had always been the golden child, star athlete, straight-A student, and now successful accountant with a perfect wife. In our mother's eyes, he could do no wrong, while I was perpetually the disappointment despite my own accomplishments. Alicia entered our family 5 years ago and immediately aligned herself with my mother. They shared a similar disregard for boundaries, often discussing my career choices, fashion sense, and perpetually single status when they thought I couldn't hear. At family gatherings, they would exchange looks when I spoke silently, communicating their judgment. When Jason and Alicia started looking for their first home last year, there was an unspoken expectation that I would help financially. Despite my solid career, I was still viewed as the family charity case, someone who needed guidance rather than an independent adult. Jan can contribute to our down payment instead of wasting money on that downtown apartment, I overheard Alicia telling my mother during Christmas dinner. It's not like she's saving for anything important. Little did they know, I had been saving meticulously and purposefully. After starting as a marketing assistant at the Baldwin Agency 8 years ago, I had worked my way up to senior marketing executive through countless late nights, weekend projects, and a determination that surprised everyone except me. My salary had grown accordingly, and while I maintained a modest lifestyle, my savings account told a different story. The decision to keep my house purchase secret wasn't made lightly. I had witnessed what happened when family members knew my business. My cousin Tara's home renovation became a family project, with Margaret appointing herself project manager despite having no relevant experience. My friend Diane made the mistake of mentioning she was house hunting only to have my mother coincidentally show up at every open house. The pattern was clear and consistent. Any major life decision became community property in the Thompson family. So I planned my escape with the precision of someone breaking out of prison. I mentioned non-existent work conferences to explain absences during house viewings. I had all paperwork sent to my office, rather than my apartment. I created a separate email account and took calls from my realtor only during work hours or in the privacy of my car. For months, I lived a double life, always on guard, always careful. In retrospect, perhaps I should have simply been honest. But years of experience had taught me that with my family, information was ammunition and privacy was a battle I had never managed to win until now. My house hunting journey began with a careful selection of my realtor. I needed someone who would understand my unique situation, someone who wouldn't think I was crazy for wanting to keep a major life purchase secret from my own family. After researching several options, I scheduled a meeting with Stephanie Walsh, a realtor known for her discretion with high-profile clients. We met at a coffee shop 3 neighborhoods away from both my apartment and my parents' home. I arrived wearing sunglasses and a hat, feeling like a character in a spy movie, rather than someone simply trying to buy a house. So Stephanie said, after I explained my situation, "You want to find and purchase a home without your family knowing, and then reveal it once everything is finalized." "Yes," I replied, half expecting her to laugh or suggest family therapy. Instead, she nodded understanding. "You'd be surprised how often I get similar requests. Sometimes it's celebrities avoiding paparazzi, sometimes it's people going through divorce, and sometimes," she paused to sip her latte. "It's just people who want one major life decision to be completely their own." Relief washed over me. She got it. We spent the next hour discussing my must-haves: a craftsman-style home with character, a front porch where I could drink morning coffee, at least 2 bedrooms, and, most importantly, a neighborhood where my mother didn't have any friends or connections. The search that followed was exhausting. Over 3 months, I viewed 27 properties, each one having most of what I wanted, but missing something crucial. Too close to my parents' social circle. Kitchen too small, no character, strange layout. Meanwhile, I was juggling demanding client presentations at work, maintaining appearances at family dinners, and constructing elaborate lies about weekend work commitments to explain my unavailability. Then, on a rainy Sunday afternoon, Stephanie called with excitement in her voice. "I think I found it. It just came on the market and it checks all your boxes. Can you meet me in 30 minutes? The house on Maple Street was everything I had dreamed of but didn't think actually existed within my budget. A 1920s craftsman with original hardwood floors, built-in bookshelves, a bay window perfect for reading, and a front porch with enough space for a swing. The previous owners had updated the kitchen and bathrooms without sacrificing the home's character, a delicate balance that most renovations failed to achieve. Walking through the rooms, I could picture my life unfolding here. Morning coffee on the porch, dinner parties in the dining room with the friends. I never felt comfortable inviting to my apartment a home office in the smaller second bedroom where I could work on freelance projects. For the first time, I was envisioning a future that was entirely mine, not shaped by family expectations or compromises. "I want to make an offer," I told Stephanie before we even left the property. What followed was a crash course in competitive home buying. There were 2 other offers within 24 hours. I went $4,000 above asking price, wrote a personal letter to the sellers explaining why I loved their home, and agreed to a flexible closing date to accommodate their needs. The nail-biting wait lasted 2 days before Stephanie called with the news the house would be mine. The mortgage process brought its own challenges. Every document had to be sent to my work email, every call taken in private, every meeting scheduled during work hours. The home inspection revealed minor issues: some electrical work needed updating, the water heater was aging, and the gutters needed replacing, but nothing structural or serious enough to derail my plans. Closing day arrived with a mixture of excitement and terror. I told my office I needed a personal day, fabricated a story about a dental procedure for my family, and met Stephanie at the title company. Signing my name dozens of times, I felt a surreal disconnect. Was I really doing this? Buying a house without telling a single family member. When the final paper was signed and the keys were placed in my hand, I burst into unexpected tears. That happens more often than you'd think, the closing agent assured me with a smile. Moving required strategic planning that would have impressed military generals. I scheduled it for a week when I had legitimately been asked to attend a marketing conference in Chicago. While I did fly to Chicago and attend one day of the conference for appearances, I flew back the same evening and spent the next 3 days orchestrating my move. The movers I hired came with stellar reviews and a premium price tag that included discretion. I paid my apartment neighbors coffee gift cards with handwritten notes explaining I was moving for a job opportunity and would appreciate their discretion if anyone asked about me. My mail was redirected to a post office box temporarily until I could be sure the move was complete. The actual moving day was both physically and emotionally exhausting. Watching my belongings disappear into the truck, I felt a mixture of liberation and fear. What if this was a terrible mistake? What if my family was right that I couldn't handle major decisions on my own? But as the movers carried the last box out, I looked around my empty apartment and felt only certainty. This was right. Setting up my new home became an exercise in self-discovery. Without my mother's voice in my head critiquing every decision, I found myself drawn to colors and styles I had never considered before. The living room walls, which I had planned to paint a safe beige, instead became a soothing sage green. The furniture arrangement prioritized my reading habit rather than conventional layouts. The kitchen was organized for someone who actually cooked, not for show, as my mother had always insisted. Each room became an expression of myself rather than a compromise. The main bedroom featured photographs from my travels, not formal family portraits. The bathroom contained luxury towels and bath products that I had always wanted but been told were wasteful. The spare bedroom became a proper home office, with a desk positioned to catch morning light, ideal for the early hours when my creativity peaked. The first weeks of homeownership passed in peaceful bliss. I established new routines: morning coffee on the porch, watching neighborhood dogs being walked, evening glasses of wine in the backyard. As fireflies emerged, weekends spent tackling small projects like installing bookshelves or planting herbs in the kitchen window. I met most of my neighbors except for the elderly woman at the end of the street whose house always seemed dark and quiet. I hosted a small housewarming with trusted friends from work, none of whom had connections to my family. We drank champagne in mismatched glasses, my proper stemware still packed somewhere, and toasted to new beginnings. For the first time in my adult life, I felt completely at peace. This was my sanctuary, my rules, my life. If only that feeling had lasted. The first indication something was wrong came about 3 weeks after moving in. I returned home from work to find a kitchen chair at a slightly different angle than I had left it. Initially, I dismissed it. Surely I had bumped it on my way out that morning and simply not noticed. Then came the throw pillows on my couch, rearranged in an order I never would have chosen. The thermostat set 2 degrees higher than I kept it. Small things easily explained away by forgetfulness or distraction during rushed mornings. But the feeling of unease persisted and grew. I found myself second-guessing my own habits and routines. Had I left that cabinet door slightly ajar? Had I moved that picture frame? Was that coffee mug in the sink from this morning or yesterday? The constant questioning made me feel like I was losing my grip on reality. One evening, I entered my bedroom and caught the distinct scent of floral perfume, a fragrance I never wore, preferring unscented products due to allergies. Standing perfectly still in the center of the room, I felt a chill creep up my spine. Someone had been in my house, in my bedroom. While I was away, I became a detective in my own home, developing systems to confirm my suspicions. Before leaving, each morning I took photos of room arrangements on my phone. I placed a single strand of hair across door frames, an old spy trick I had read about in novels. I kept a notebook, documenting the position of items frequently found disturbed. My work performance began to suffer. During client meetings, my mind would wander to my house, wondering if someone was there at that very moment, touching my things, invading my space. My boss Linda pulled me aside after I spaced out during an important presentation. "Everything okay, Jan? You seem distracted lately." I made excuses about insomnia and promised to focus more, but the truth was that my sanctuary had become a source of anxiety rather than peace. My investigation expanded. I researched the previous owners, wondering if perhaps they had kept keys. The elderly couple had moved to Arizona to be closer to grandchildren, unlikely culprits for my current situation. I questioned neighbors about unusual activity, framing it as general security concerns rather than specific suspicions. "Have you noticed any unfamiliar cars on the street lately?" I asked Troy, my neighbor across the street, as he walked his golden retriever one evening. "Not that I can recall," he replied, looking thoughtful. "Though I'm at work most days. My security camera might have caught something. Want me to check the footage?" I declined, not ready to involve others in what might be paranoia, but his mention of security cameras planted a seed. The next day, I purchased a comprehensive security system, doorbell camera, motion sensors for main rooms, and cameras covering all entrances. The installation took a full Saturday, but as I tested the system that evening, I felt a small measure of control returning. If someone was entering my home, I would have proof. I didn't have to wait long. 3 days later, while reviewing footage during my lunch break at work, I froze as a familiar figure appeared on my phone screen. My mother using a key to enter my front door at 9:30 in the morning, looking around cautiously before stepping inside. The betrayal hit like a physical blow. I watched in horror as she moved through my home with the confidence of ownership, opening drawers, peering into closets, even checking my medicine cabinet. She took photos of several rooms and jotted down measurements. After 40 minutes of uninvited exploration, she left, locking the door behind her as if nothing had happened. My hands trembled as I called Stephanie, my voice barely controlled. "Is there any way someone could have gotten a key to my house? Did you give spares to anyone?" Her confusion was genuine. "No, absolutely not. The only keys were the ones I gave you at closing. The sellers returned all of theirs." "Why? What's happened?" I explained the situation, and Stephanie's professional demeanor shifted to genuine concern. "There is one possibility," she said hesitantly. "The lockbox key that was left with your neighbor for emergencies during the inspection period. It should have been returned, but if it wasn't—" "Which neighbor?" I asked, although I already suspected the answer. "Elaine Wilkins. The older woman at the end of the street. She's been the neighborhood key holder for years. Most real estate agents in the area use her since she's home all day." The pieces clicked into terrible place. I thanked Stephanie and immediately called the security company, arranging for an emergency lock change that evening. Then I searched social media for any connection between my mother and Elaine Wilkins, finding it within minutes. They belonged to the same gardening club. The same club my mother had suddenly developed an interest in 3 months earlier, right around the time I began house hunting. The depth of the deception was staggering. My mother had somehow discovered my house search, identified which neighborhood I was focusing on, befriended the very person most likely to have access to my future home, and obtained a key through manipulation and lies. All to continue her lifelong hobby of violating my boundaries. As I sat at my desk, staring at security footage of my own mother sneaking through my home, I made a decision. This would end now on my terms. I just needed evidence of exactly how far the violation went. The opportunity came sooner than expected. 2 days later, my most important client canceled our afternoon meeting at the last minute due to a family emergency. Finding myself with a rare free afternoon, I decided to head home early and perhaps start the backyard herb garden I had been planning. The spring day matched my improving mood: sunshine, light breeze, birds singing. I even stopped at a nursery to buy basil and rosemary seedlings, imagining fresh herbs for summer cooking. As I turned onto Maple Street, my momentary peace shattered. Parked in my driveway was my mother's silver Lexus. Alongside a red SUV I recognized as belonging to Alicia, my brother's wife. My first instinct was to confront them immediately, but something held me back. A lifetime of being overruled, dismissed, and gaslighted had taught me that confrontation without complete information was futile. Instead of pulling into the driveway, I parked 2 houses down and approached my own home like an intruder, circling to the back where the kitchen door had a small window I could peek through. Through the glass, I could see movement in the living room beyond. Taking a deep breath, I tried my key in the back door, relieved when it opened silently. The herbs were left on the patio as I slipped inside, heart pounding so loudly I was certain it would give me away. Voices drifted from the front of the house, not just my mother and Alicia, but a third voice I vaguely recognized. Moving silently across the kitchen floor in my work flats, I positioned myself in the hallway, where I could hear everything but remain hidden from view. The master bedroom really needs a complete overhaul, my mother was saying, her voice carrying that authoritative tone I knew too well. Jan has always had terrible taste in bedding. All those dark colors make the room feel like a cave. The furniture arrangement is all wrong too, Alicia added. The bed should be under the window, not against the wall. And those nightstands don't match anything. The third voice chimed in and I placed it. Susan, a friend of Alicia's I had met at various family functions. Are these measurements correct, Margaret? If we're going to order new curtains and bedding, we need to be precise. My mother laughed. Yes, I measured twice. Jan would never know we change things while she's at work. She's so oblivious sometimes. Their footsteps moved and I pressed myself against the wall as they continued their unauthorized tour into what I had made my home office. Look at this organizational system, Alicia snorted. Color-coded folders. Who does she think she is? Martha Stewart. She's always been like that, my mother replied, trying so hard to appear put together when really she needs guidance on everything. Remember how she wanted to major in art history? Thank goodness I convinced her marketing was more practical. The memory stung. I had indeed wanted to study art history, a passion cultivated through years of museum visits with my father. My mother had staged what amounted to an intervention involving extended family members to pressure me into a sensible major. I had given in, as I always did. Their voices continued as they moved through my private spaces, commenting on everything from my choice of shower curtain to the contents of my closet. Is this her favorite jacket? Alicia asked, and I imagined her hands on my treasured navy blazer, the one I had splurged on after my first major promotion. Try it on, my mother encouraged. It would look better on you anyway. Jan never could wear that shade of blue without looking washed out. Look what I found, Susan said, her voice suddenly excited. Photo albums and journals in this bottom drawer. My stomach dropped. Those albums contained personal memories, travels, friendships, moments of my life, deliberately kept separate from family judgment. And my journals. The thought of them reading my private thoughts made me physically ill. Oh, these are perfect, my mother exclaimed. We can use these to help decorate for the surprise makeover. Susan, take photos of any pages with good pictures we can frame. Do you think she'd notice if some of these things just disappeared? Alicia asked, and I could hear drawers opening and closing. She has so much stuff crammed in here. Jason and I could use some of these kitchen gadgets she probably never uses. That was the moment something broke inside me, or perhaps it was the moment something finally clicked into place. The violation was complete and total. This wasn't just about a spare key or a nosy mother. This was 3 adults conspiring to reshape my life, my space, my belongings, according to their preferences, without any regard for my autonomy or feelings. I took several deep, silent breaths, forcing my racing heart to slow. I would not confront them while emotional. I would not give them the satisfaction of dismissing me as overreacting as they had so many times before. Instead, I would observe, document, and plan my response carefully. As they moved back toward the kitchen, I slipped into the laundry room, leaving the door slightly ajar. From this vantage point, I could see everything while remaining hidden. I think this kitchen is our biggest challenge, my mother was saying, running her hand across my carefully chosen quartz countertop with disapproval. The cabinets need to be white, not this outdated wood color. And these open shelves are just asking for dust to collect. We should probably start with the living room, Susan suggested, checking her watch. It would make the biggest immediate impact when she comes home. New throw pillows, different curtains, maybe rearrange the furniture. Good thinking, my mother agreed. Alicia, make a list of everything we need to buy. We can come back next Tuesday when Jan has that client dinner. Should give us at least 3 hours to make the changes. Alicia pulled out her phone, tapping notes. Should we get Jason to help move the heavier furniture? Definitely, my mother nodded. He can bring his truck too. Some of these pieces really should go to storage. That armchair is particularly hideous. The armchair in question had belonged to my grandfather, the only family member who had ever truly respected my boundaries. He had left it to me specifically because we had spent countless hours in it together, him reading aloud while I curled against his side. Its presence in my living room was a tribute to him, not a design choice. They continued planning their invasion as I remained motionless, memorizing every word, every casual dismissal of my tastes and preferences. Finally, after what seemed like hours but was probably only 40 minutes, they gathered their notes and measurements and prepared to leave. I counted to 30 after hearing the front door close, then moved silently to the living room window. I watched as they stood in my driveway laughing and chatting, my mother pointing to various parts of my house, explaining her vision for changes. Only when both cars had pulled away did I allow myself to react. I sank onto the supposedly hideous armchair, trembling with a combination of rage violation and strange relief. At least now I knew. The gaslighting, the small signs I had noticed, I wasn't crazy. The invasion was real, documented, and worse than I had imagined. As my breathing steadied, I reached for my phone and made a single call. Harold's locksmith service, a gruff voice answered. "I need every lock in my house changed," I said, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. "Today, emergency service." "That's gonna cost you extra for same-day service, ma'am." I smiled grimly. "That's fine, it's worth every penny." I didn't have to wait long for the confrontation. The following afternoon, I was removing the last of the locksmith's packaging from my new doorknobs when the doorbell rang. The security app on my phone showed my mother, Alicia, and Susan standing on my porch, arms laden with shopping bags. For a moment, I considered not answering, but the time for hiding was over. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door and leaned against the frame, blocking their entrance. "Jan," my mother exclaimed with false cheer. "What a surprise to find you home on a workday. Are you feeling ill, sweetie?" The concerned expression would have been convincing to anyone who hadn't watched her plotting to overhaul my home 24 hours earlier. "I'm feeling fine," I replied calmly. "Just working from home today. What brings you all here? And how did you know where I live?" The momentary flash of panic in their eyes was almost comical. My mother recovered first, pushing past me into the foyer as if I had invited her in. "Surprise, honey, we came to help spruce up your new place. I know you must be overwhelmed with the move and work, so we brought a few things to make it homier." Alicia and Susan followed her lead, entering without invitation and setting their bags on my entryway bench. "How did you know I bought a house?" I repeated, closing the door but remaining near it. "Oh, you know how word gets around," my mother waved dismissively. "The important thing is, we're here now to help. Susan has an amazing eye for design, and Alicia found some gorgeous throw pillows that will brighten up your living room." "Actually," I said, my voice steady despite my pounding heart, "the important thing is that you entered my home without permission yesterday. And apparently many times before that, based on the security footage I have." The shopping bag my mother was unpacking dropped to the floor with a thud. Her eyes widened, then narrowed. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, but the slight tremor in her voice betrayed her. "We just found out about the house from Jason's friend who works at the county records office. We wanted to surprise you." "Really?" I pulled out my phone and held it up, showing a still from my security footage. "Because this is you entering my house with a key yesterday at 11:15 in the morning. And this," I swiped to another image, "is the three of you in my bedroom going through my closet." Susan had the decency to look ashamed, her gaze dropping to the floor. Alicia's face flushed red, but her expression remained defiant. My mother, however, shifted tactics immediately. "Well, of course I came to check on the place. As your mother, it's my prerogative to make sure you're not making another impulsive decision. Honestly, Jan, buying a house without family input, what were you thinking? You know nothing about home maintenance or decorating." The familiar feeling of being diminished, of having my competence questioned, swept over me. For a moment, I was 10 years old again, being told I had done everything wrong. But this time I had evidence. This time I was standing in my house with my name on the deed. "How did you get a key?" I asked, ignoring her attempt to derail the conversation. My mother's lips pressed into a thin line. "That's not important." "It's extremely important," I countered. "That key was never given to you." You obtained it through deception. Your neighbor Elaine gave it to me, she finally admitted. As your mother, she recognized I had a right to check on your welfare. What exactly did you tell Elaine to convince her to give you access to someone else's home? The silence stretched uncomfortably before Alicia jumped in. You're being so dramatic, Jan. This is what families do, they help each other. We were just trying to make your house nicer since you clearly need assistance. The way you have things arranged makes no sense. You were planning to change my home while I was at work, I said. I heard everything yesterday. The curtains, the furniture, even getting rid of Grandpa's chair. You were going to throw out my belongings without my knowledge or consent. We were going to surprise you with improvements, my mother insisted, her voice rising. You're twisting this into something ugly when we were just trying to help. This is exactly why we didn't tell you first. You always overreact. The gaslighting was so familiar it almost worked. Almost. But the image of them laughing in my driveway planning to discard my possessions remained sharp in my mind. I need you all to leave, I said quietly. And I need any keys you have to my house returned immediately. You can't be serious, my mother scoffed. After we went to all this trouble, at least look at what we brought before you, throw another tantrum. This isn't a tantrum, I said, moving to open the front door. This is me establishing a boundary. You entered my home without permission. You plotted to alter my living space without consent. Those actions have consequences. Please leave. Susan was already gathering her purse, clearly uncomfortable with the confrontation. Alicia stood her ground beside my mother, arms crossed defensively. Jason will be furious when he hears how you're treating us, she threatened. After everything your family has done for you. Jason is welcome to call me directly, I replied. Now please leave before this becomes even more uncomfortable. My mother made one last attempt, her expression shifting to wounded martyrdom. I don't understand why you're being so secretive and hostile. I'm your mother. I have a right to be involved in your life decisions. Being my mother gives you the right to love me, I said, feeling a strange calm settling over me. It doesn't give you the right to control me. The key, please. After another tense silence, she reached into her purse and pulled out a key to my front door. A key I had never given her. I held out my hand, and after a moment's hesitation, she dropped it into my palm. This isn't the end of this discussion, she warned as she finally moved toward the door. Actually, it is, I replied. At least until you're ready to acknowledge what you did was wrong. I watched from my porch as they loaded their shopping bags of unwanted improvements back into their cars. My mother turned once to give me a look. I had seen countless times disappointment mixed with calculation, already planning her next approach. Then they were gone, leaving me standing in the doorway of a house that finally truly felt like mine. The fallout was immediate and extensive. Within an hour, my phone was exploding with notifications. Text messages from extended family members expressing concern about my mental state. Voicemails from Jason alternating between demands to know why I had been so disrespectful to our mother and accusations that I was always trying to create drama. Margaret herself deployed every tactic in her arsenal. First came the wounded messages. After everything I've sacrificed for you. Then the health concerns. This stress isn't good for my blood pressure. Finally, the minimization. I don't understand why you're making such a big deal about a little surprise makeover. I sat alone in my violated home, surrounded by spaces that no longer felt entirely mine. For the first time since discovering their invasion, I allowed myself to cry not delicate tears but wrenching sobs that came from a place deep inside where a lifetime of ignored boundaries had accumulated. When the tears finally subsided, I looked around my living room. The armchair my grandfather had loved. The bookshelves I had carefully arranged by genre, and then color a system that made perfect sense to me and apparently no one else. The throw pillows in deep jewel tones rather than the pastels my mother had always insisted suited me better. This was my space created to nurture my spirit rather than conform to someone else's expectations. And I would defend it even against the people who claimed to love me most. Harold the locksmith arrived within 2 hours of my call, a gruff, older man with calloused hands and kind eyes that asked no questions, when I explained I needed every lock changed immediately. Family trouble, he asked, as he removed the first doorknob. You could say that, I replied. He nodded knowingly. Happens more than you'd think. Got 3 other calls this month, just like yours. Always family or exes. I watched as he methodically replaced each lock, explaining the features of the new deadbolts he was installing. These are bump-proof and pick-resistant. Nobody's getting in unless you want them to. The physical security changes were just the beginning. The following weekend, I invested in a comprehensive security upgrade doorbell camera with facial recognition motion-activated lights covering all approaches to the house and window sensors that would alert me to any attempt at entry. The expense was significant, but the peace of mind was worth every penny. Meanwhile, the pressure from my family escalated. My mother called daily, her messages shifting between guilt, anger, and occasional moments of false contrition that never actually acknowledged wrongdoing. "I just wanted to help you make your house beautiful," she insisted in one voicemail. "You've always needed guidance with these things. Remember how your college dorm looked before I fixed it?" Jason made an unexpected appearance at my workplace one afternoon, cornering me in the lobby as I returned from lunch. "You need to apologize to Mom," he demanded, without preamble. "She's been crying for days." For being caught breaking into my house repeatedly, I asked, keeping my voice level despite the scene he was creating. For planning to throw out my belongings without my permission? He had the grace to look momentarily uncertain before rallying. "She had a key. It wasn't breaking in." A key she obtained through deception, which she used without my knowledge or consent, I countered. "Would you be okay with someone entering your house while you were at work, criticizing your possessions and planning to replace them?" "That's different," he insisted, though his conviction seemed to waver. "Mom was just trying to help. Help would be asking what I need. Help would be respecting my choices. What she did was a violation. Jason and I need you to understand that." Our conversation ended unresolved, but it was the first time I had stood my ground with my brother without eventually giving in to maintain family peace. It was uncomfortable, but also strangely freeing. Alicia took a different approach, spreading stories to extended family members that painted me as unstable and ungrateful. According to cousins who later reported back to me, she described a scene where I had violently thrown them out for bringing housewarming gifts. The further the story traveled through family channels, the more dramatic it became, eventually including claims that I was having some kind of breakdown. Rather than defend myself against each distorted version, I focused on building my support network. I confided the full truth to my friend Kendra, who had witnessed my mother's boundary violations since college. "I'm not surprised," she said over wine on my porch one evening. "Remember when she showed up unannounced at our apartment junior year and rearranged the entire kitchen because she didn't like how we organized the cabinets?" My coworker Diane shared similar stories about her own family. "My sister used to borrow my clothes without asking, even after I moved out. It took changing my locks and refusing to speak to her for a month before she finally got the message. Even my neighbor Troy became an unexpected ally, offering to keep an eye on my house during work hours after I explained the situation in general terms. Family can be complicated," he said, with understanding beyond his 30 years. "My dad used to show up at my apartment at 6 in the morning because real men start their day early. Took a move across the state before he finally respected my schedule. The most difficult part was learning to stand firm in the face of tactics that had worked on me for decades. The first time I hung up when my mother began manipulating my hands shook for an hour afterward. When I didn't answer the door during an unannounced visit, I spent the evening fighting waves of guilt. "You're not being cruel," I reminded myself repeatedly. "You're establishing necessary boundaries." As expected, my mother's response to these new boundaries was what my therapist later called an extinction burst. An escalation of problematic behavior. When previously successful tactics stopped working, she showed up at my workplace claiming a family emergency. She attempted to charm information out of my neighbors. She even enlisted various family members to call with suspicious-sounding concerns that inevitably led to suggestions I reconcile with my mother. The most audacious attempt came when she claimed to have fallen and needed me to drive her to the hospital only for me to arrive at her house and find her hosting a bridge club with no sign of injury. When confronted, she simply said, "Well, I knew this was the only way you'd come see me." Throughout this challenging period, I found unexpected strength in therapy sessions with Dr. Patterson, a compassionate woman who specialized in family dynamics. In our weekly meetings, I gained vocabulary for what I had experienced: enmeshment, infantilization, emotional manipulation. What your mother and family did wasn't just annoying or overbearing, Dr. Patterson explained. It was a fundamental violation of your autonomy as an adult. Your reaction isn't oversensitive, it's appropriate. I devoured books on toxic family relationships and boundary setting, recognizing patterns that had shaped my life for decades. I started journaling again this time, with no fear of my private thoughts being discovered and used against me. I even began meditating, finding that 10 minutes of mindful breathing could calm the anxiety that spiked before family interactions. Small victories accumulated. A full weekend passed without interruption from family demands. A conversation with Jason where he actually listened to my perspective instead of automatically defending our mother. A family email thread where I stated my position clearly and didn't back down when challenged. The most surprising moment came during a chance encounter with my mother at the grocery store. Instead of her usual domineering presence, I noticed something new in her posture: uncertainty. For perhaps the first time in our relationship, she wasn't entirely sure how I would react, and that hesitation created space for something healthier to potentially grow. "Your new locks seem to be working well," she commented with a hint of bitterness as we stood awkwardly by the produce section. "They are," I confirmed without apology. "I feel safe in my home now." The subtle shift in her expression told me she had heard what I wasn't saying, that her actions had made me feel unsafe in the first place. As weeks passed, I reclaimed my sanctuary step by step. I conducted a sage smudging ritual, walking through each room with the burning herbs while consciously releasing the negative energy of the invasion. I repainted the bedroom that they had criticized, choosing an even deeper shade of the blue they had deemed too dark. I rearranged furniture based solely on my preferences and comfort. Each small act of reclamation healed something inside me. My home became truly mine again, not just legally but emotionally. The peace I had briefly known before discovering the invasion returned deeper and more authentic because it was now protected by boundaries I had the strength to maintain. 3 months after changing my locks, I arrived at Aunt Ruth's house for Thanksgiving dinner with uncharacteristic confidence. In years past, family gatherings had been exercises in endurance with me, carefully monitoring my words and actions to avoid criticism. This year felt different. I was different. The tension was palpable when I entered the dining room. Conversations paused momentarily, then resumed with slightly forced cheerfulness. My mother sat at her usual place at the center of the table, her smile tight as she greeted me with a stiff hug. Throughout the meal, she peppered the conversation with passive-aggressive comments, thinly disguised as concern. "Jan seems to be doing well, despite living all alone in that big house," she remarked to my uncle. "I worry about her managing the maintenance, but she won't accept any help." "The house is exactly the right size for me," I replied evenly. "And I found excellent service providers for anything I need help with." As pumpkin pie was being served, I felt a familiar pressure building, the need to address the elephant in the room that everyone was carefully avoiding. In past years, I would have suppressed that urge, choosing peace over honesty. This time I took a deep breath and set my dessert fork down. "Actually, I'd like to say something," I announced, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. All eyes turned to me, some curious, others apprehensive. "I know many of you have heard different versions of what happened with my house. I want to be clear about my perspective. I purchased my home privately because I wanted one space in my life that was truly mine, where I made all the decisions without committee input." My mother shifted uncomfortably in her chair as I continued. "When I discovered that my boundaries had been violated, that people had entered my home without permission, criticized my choices, and planned to change things without my consent, I was deeply hurt. The locks were changed not out of spite, but out of a need for basic security and privacy." The silence around the table was deafening. I made eye contact with various family members as I concluded. "I love this family, but love should include respect for each other's autonomy. I'm not asking anyone to agree with my decisions or my taste in furniture. I'm simply asking for the same respect for my space that each of you expects for yours." For a moment, no one spoke. Then, surprisingly, it was Aunt Ruth who broke the silence. "I think Jan has a point," she said, patting my hand. "Margaret, remember how upset you were when your mother-in-law rearranged your kitchen after Thomas was born? You complained about it for years. My mother flushed at the comparison but remained silent. Around the table, other family members began nodding, some sharing their own stories of boundaries crossed and resentments harbored. "Remember when Grandma threw out Dad's collection of model airplanes?" my cousin Andrea chimed in. "He never really forgave her for that." Or when Uncle Pete painted Aunt Linda's sewing room without asking because he thought the color was too bright, someone else added. The conversation shifted, becoming a family-wide discussion about respect and boundaries that felt both revolutionary and overdue. Throughout it all, I noticed Jason watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. After dinner, he found me alone in the kitchen helping with dishes. "I need to say something," he began awkwardly. "I've been thinking about what happened and about our childhood. The way Mom always went through your things, but never mine. The different rules we had. It wasn't fair." The admission caught me off guard. No, it wasn't. "When Alicia told me what they were planning to do to your house, I didn't think it was a big deal at first," he continued, carefully drying a serving platter. "But then I tried to imagine someone doing that to our place, and it felt completely different. I wouldn't be okay with it either." His acknowledgement meant more than I had expected. "Thank you for saying that. I can't promise Mom will ever fully understand," he added, "but I do, and I'm sorry I didn't have your back right away." Later that evening, Margaret approached me as I was preparing to leave. Her usual confidence was tempered with something that looked almost like uncertainty. "I still think you overreacted," she began, and my heart sank at what seemed like the start of another justification. But then she surprised me. "But I can see that what I did hurt you. That wasn't my intention." It wasn't a full acknowledgement of wrongdoing, but from my mother it was significant progress. "Thank you for saying that," I replied carefully. "Would it be possible for us to start over somehow?" she asked, and I noticed the absence of her usual demand. "I think so," I said. "But things need to be different. Real respect for boundaries. No keys to my house. No surprise visits or makeovers." She nodded slowly, clearly struggling with these limitations, but accepting them nonetheless. "I can try." Even Alicia approached me before I left, her usual confidence subdued. "I should have asked before touching your things," she admitted grudgingly. "I wouldn't like someone going through my closet either." These weren't perfect apologies or complete transformations, but they were small acknowledgments that my boundaries deserved respect. As I drove home that night, I felt a weight lifting that I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying my entire adult life. The following months brought a gradual establishment of new norms in my family relationships. My mother still occasionally suggested home improvements, but now she offered them as suggestions, rather than executing them behind my back. Jason and I developed a closer relationship based on mutual respect rather than his automatic alliance with our mother. Family gatherings became less stressful as I learned to maintain boundaries without apology. Most importantly, I developed a new relationship with myself. The confidence that had begun with standing my ground about my house extended to other areas of my life. I spoke up more in meetings at work, resulting in a project leadership role I would have previously been too insecure to pursue. I started dating with clearer expectations about how I deserved to be treated. I even took a painting class, a nod to the art history passion I had abandoned years ago. My home truly became my sanctuary, a place that reflected my tastes, my needs, my personality. No keys were ever given out, regardless of relationship status or claimed emergencies. Family visits happened by invitation only in scheduled blocks of time that respected my privacy and autonomy. One year, after changing my locks, I hosted a proper housewarming party. My mother attended, and though she bit her tongue visibly when seeing my deliberately mismatched dining chairs, she managed to compliment the garden I had planted, and seemed genuinely pleased when I showed her the family photos I had chosen to display images that celebrated connection without sacrificing individuality. Looking back, I realized that buying my house in secret was perhaps not the healthiest approach, born as it was from years of having my boundaries disregarded. In an ideal world, I would have felt safe enough to share my excitement about such a major life step with the people who should have been my biggest supporters. But the violation that followed became the catalyst for change that was long overdue. By standing firm when my space was invaded, I learned to stand firm in other areas where my needs and feelings had been routinely dismissed. The most valuable lesson wasn't about locks or security systems, but about the importance of boundaries in all relationships. True love includes respect for autonomy. Genuine support means encouraging independence, not fostering dependence. Family connections should nourish rather than constrain. Most importantly, I learned that being the author of your own life sometimes means writing certain people into smaller roles than they want, and that's not only okay, it's sometimes necessary for your own well-being and growth. My grandfather's old armchair still sits in my living room, a reminder of the one family member who always respected my boundaries. Sometimes I imagine him smiling at how far I've come, at the peaceful sanctuary I've created, at the strength I found when it mattered most. Have you ever had to establish difficult boundaries with family members? How did you handle the situation, and what did you learn from the experience? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if you found my journey helpful, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share with anyone who might be struggling with similar family dynamics. Remember, setting healthy boundaries isn't selfish. It's an act of self-respect that ultimately creates the foundation for more authentic relationships. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you find peace in your own space, whatever form that takes.